I'm very excited to present our paper From Slow-Mo to Ludicrous Speed, comfortably manipulating the perception of linear in-car VR motion through vehicular translational gain and attenuation on behalf of all of my co-authors. New standalone VR headsets allow users to take their immersive experiences and applications with them on the go, using them outside their homes, even when traveling on buses, planes, trains, or cars, making their trips more enjoyable by watching movies, playing games, or potentially even more productive while working. To avoid motion sickness, passenger VR experiences often use one-to-one matched motion between the real and virtual motion, meaning that the motion of the car you're sitting in is displayed to you visually in the virtual world. This is done to reduce the mismatch between the sensed vestibular motion, the real car motion, and the visual motion in the head-mounted display, which in turn should reduce motion sickness. Using only matched motion in your virtual experience can, however, limit the types of application and experiences that you can create and use while traveling. A space shooter game might not seem very realistic if you're sitting in a car that's slowly driving through city traffic, as you would be expecting faster motions in such a virtual world. On the other hand, while you're working, you might prefer slower background motion to not distract you from your task, which could be difficult if you're traveling on a motorway. So to overcome this limitation, we propose introducing translational gain to the vehicle's velocity. Gain is a method that has been used extensively in VR research before. Applying translational gain to movements in virtual spaces like walking or reaching lets physically constrained users traverse to larger virtual spaces, while attenuation, gain levels below 1, would lead to smaller virtual distances traveled in virtuality. In our work, we used these methodologies and applied both vehicular translational gain and attenuation to the speed of a car that was driving along a real city road at around 50 kilometers an hour, both during a productivity-related reading task while traveling along a virtual city scene in Study 1, and a space shooter game flying along a trench run in which users could shoot enemy ships in Study 2. This was done to determine if the design space of vehicular VR experiences can be expanded without increasing motion sickness. In Study 1, our participants performed a reading task while traveling in the car. This was done to investigate whether manipulating visual speed would affect productivity or the journey experience in VR, meaning that whether changing the visual speed could affect how long or how fast participants perceived the journey to be. Participants took part in 3 60-minute sessions, one at matched motion, one with increasing levels of gain, and one with increasing levels of attenuation applied to the visual motion. In each session, the car traveled along 4 sections of straight road that were 2 kilometers long each, with a speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour. During the matched motion condition, the virtual car was traveling at the matched speed to the real car in all 4 sections, meaning the virtual and the real car were always traveling at the same speed. In the gain condition, the gain level increased with each section, meaning that the virtual car speed was amplified with each section, while the real car speed was staying the same. Going from gain levels of 1.5, representing around 72 kilometers an hour, up to gain levels of 7, representing a journey of 338 kilometers an hour. And finally, in the attenuation condition, the virtual speed reduced with each section, meaning that the virtual car was traveling slower than the real car, going from levels of 0.66, representing around 32 kilometers an hour, down to levels of 0.14, representing 7 kilometers an hour. While in the car, participants performed a reading comprehension task, during which they read short passages of text followed by 4 multiple-choice questions, while also performing a secondary attention task. Based on the literature in our study design, we formulated the following 4 research questions. Does the usage or increase of gain and attenuation apply to the visual perceived self-motion effect? 1. Motion sickness symptoms measured in real time and post-hoc. 2. The perception of the journey, travel distance, time spent traveling, real car speed, and virtual car speed. 3. The ride experience, safety, excitement, and relaxation, maybe even realism. And 4. Task performance, reading speed, and workload. So what did we find? Motion sickness was measured using the misery scale throughout the experience and the SSQ at the end of each session. For the misery scale, we found that motion sickness increased with each section, so the longer participants were immersed in the experience, the stronger the motion sickness symptoms. And we believe that this increase in motion sickness with each section is not due to an increase in attenuation or gain level, but rather due to the longer exposure to the situation, because we find the same effects for the matched motion condition. And overall, attenuation resulted in highest motion sickness scores, which were significantly higher than in the matched motion condition, suggesting that the manipulation of the virtual speed only results in increases in motion sickness when the visual speed is reduced. For the SSQ data, we find no difference in motion sickness between the conditions, and overall our participants experienced lower levels of motion sickness, so nobody got extremely motion sick. Next, for the perception of journey. We found that applying gain had an effect on how the journey was perceived, while applying attenuation did not really affect participants' perception of the journey. Applying gain resulted in longer perceived distances traveled, faster perceived real car speed, and this effect increased with each section and with increasing levels of visual car speed, and faster perceived virtual car speed, and again this effect increased with each section and with increases in visual car speed. Now for the ride experience measures. Again, mainly gain had an effect on these measures, and we found that participants rated the experience of safety lower in the gain condition compared to the other two conditions. They experienced higher levels of excitement in this condition and lower levels of relaxation when perceiving faster virtual speeds compared to the attenuation and matched motion condition. And finally, how did these manipulations affect participants' perceived workload and the performance on the reading task? Gain did result in higher perceived workload compared to the attenuation condition, with the overall performance in the reading task not being affected by the condition, with participants answering the same percentage of questions correctly in each condition. But in the matched motion conditions, they were able to read faster compared to the other two conditions, suggesting that manipulating the visual background speed can have some minor effects on workload and performance. So to sum up our first study, matched motion overall was the most preferred condition, followed by the gain one. However, if you take the two manipulation conditions together, they were more preferred overall, suggesting that participants did enjoy the manipulation of the visual speed. And the speed manipulation wasn't always noticeable, particularly for the attenuation conditions. So a lot of participants didn't notice that we increased the levels of gain and attenuation, and some didn't even notice the manipulation at all, saying that there was no difference between the three conditions, with some participants even thinking that the real car increased or decreased in speed. Vehicular gain and attenuation can be used without strongly affecting sickness. None of our participants got extremely motion sick, and only a few dropped out in the first condition. And gain affected how fast and how far participants thought they were traveling, so you could use this manipulation to manipulate how participants experience their journey, and if they want to get somewhere fast or slow, you could use that to manipulate the experience of the journey. And then matched motion attenuation are more suitable for relaxation and productivity conditions.
We're okay. We're clear. Punch it!
For study 2, the car was driving along the same straight route as for study 1, but only for 2 sections, throughout which the virtual speed changed multiple times. The first section was separated into 2 halves. In the first one, participants experienced matched motion with the spaceship moving at the same speed as the real car until it stopped at a traffic light halfway through the section. While stopped, we changed the gain level to 9.5, our fastest speed, also termed ludicrous speed. This means once the car starts moving again, participants experience extremely fast acceleration and high top speeds. In the second section, the speed changed multiple times while the car was in motion, going from high gains level to matched motion to low gain levels. And the speed changes were based on game events. For example, when a large explosion occurred in front of the ship, it had to slow down extremely. So what did we find for our second study? Overall, participants preferred the constant high gain level in the first section, our ludicrous speed, out of all the conditions in this study. Speed manipulations did not increase motion sickness here, so nobody felt very motion sick in our study. And participants also mentioned that changing the visual speed while the car was in motion felt uncomfortable and weird. They preferred visual speed changes to be matched to physical speed changes. For example, when the real car slows down, the virtual one should slow down as well, independent of the overall speed differences between real and virtual car. And finally, participants did not want control over the speed changes in the game. They rather said that the speed changes should be determined by the real car speed. So to sum this all up, we found that applying virtual vehicular gain to real car speed is more noticeable than applying attenuation for urban driving with speeds around 50 km an hour. And speed manipulation, so gain and attenuation, can be applied to visual car speed or virtual car speed without causing strong motion sickness. Interesting here, even though the attenuation condition was less noticeable, it caused higher motion sickness ratings in our participants. And applying gain is more suitable to manipulate the passenger's journey experience, making them feel like the real car is going faster or they're traveling further. Our participants also mentioned that virtual speed manipulations should match the content of the virtual application that you're using. And based on our data, slower and matched motion are more suitable for productivity applications and when wanting to relax throughout your journey, while faster virtual motion is more exciting and more suitable for games. Also, changes in virtual speed should match the changes in the real vehicle speed. So whenever the real car is slowing down, the virtual car should slow down as well. So it does not matter if overall the virtual speed and the real car move at different levels, as long as they slow down and speed up at the same time. Alternatively, you could also change the manipulation while the car is stationary. So as we done in our second study, while a car was at a red light, we changed the speed up to a ludicrous speed. So when the car was starting to move again, participants experienced the new gain level. So what is next? So far, we've only applied our speed manipulations on straight roads. So our next step would be to apply these manipulations and speed on curved roads and to test whether we can apply gain or attenuation to the orientation changes of the car as well. We're also interested whether our speed manipulation potentially have different effects for different driving profiles, such as on a motorway where you tend to stay at a more constant speed for longer periods, or for rural driving. Our study has also focused on using VR headsets, the Pico 3, but we're also interested how these findings can translate to other XR technologies. How can we integrate them in AR, for example? We're also interested in designing a way to dynamically apply our virtual speed manipulation depending on both the user, the current mood and physical condition, as well as the type of journey. Thank you so much for watching my video and for listening to my talk. And if you have questions or you want more details about our work, please have a look at our paper or come to my talk at CHI this year.